Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. I've been getting a lot of questions regarding leader length on my spinning rods. You know that I'm a big proponent of braid to fluoro when I'm using my spinning rods. So the questions that I've been getting a lot in the comments are, how much fluorocarbon leader do I attach to that braided line? What is the leader length that I've got? So guys, when we come back, we're going to talk about leader length and what goes into my decision making in terms of how long that leader should be and if there should be a leader. Stick around, we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to MFO, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Guys, we're going to talk about leader length on your spinning gear. If you would, I'm just going to cover this real quick. Please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification button. Thank you for doing that. We appreciate all of the people who subscribe to the channel, who tune in every day to watch the channel and the information, who send their comments. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. I really appreciate that. And I just want you to know that that is appreciated, and I mean that sincerely. Let's talk about leader length. So I'm going to give you kind of what I use as my standard. If I have a 7-foot rod somewhere, a rod that's approximately 7 foot long, what I'm typically doing with kind of most baits is, I'm going to show you up close. I've got that braid going out to about here. And so my leader is the remaining length of my rod and whatever I've got hanging down from the tip of my rod. That's in a typical situation. Let's say I'm throwing a Ned rig or a shaky head or a wacky rig Cinco. I'm looking at that like, hey, if I'm going along docks, if I'm in relatively shallow water, 10-foot water, things like that, I don't mind that. I like to have that braid up here on my finger, and a 7-foot to 10-foot leader of fluorocarbon, in my opinion, is fine when it comes to having that much leader material in the water. Especially, like I said, if I'm throwing the docks and I'm working in water that's 10 feet or more, and if that water has some stain to it. I don't feel like having a foot or two of braid in the water is a downside. And what I will tell you is that I'm very much about that braid laying on the surface of the water. I want to see that high-vis yellow braid on the surface of the water. If I've got braid laying on the surface and then my leader is on the surface until it goes down, I don't see as much as if I've got that braid going along the surface, and then as the bait's starting to sink, I see the braid starting to get pulled down. That gives me a much better visual indicator of a bite or of the line starting to move when a fish is taking the bait. And that, to me, is important. I'm not saying that I want to have my high-vis braid 2 feet away from my bait. I want to have some distance, but I think that 7 feet in a lot of situations, especially if you're talking about situations where you're throwing the bait and letting it sink down, you're not dragging the bait, where there's an angle to the line and things like that. I think that 7 to 10 feet is plenty of leader length in that situation. Now again, if I'm throwing a drop shot, for example, and I'm in clear water, that's going to be a situation where, no, I'm going to put in a lot more leader length. I might even double that, especially if you're talking about water that now we're fishing in 15 feet of water or 12 to 20 feet of water, something like that. I'm going to, at that point, double my leader length. And instead of having a rod length, I'll have 2 or more rod length of fluorocarbon leader. And as we talked about last week or the week before, the one time that I'm not going to have any braided line backing is if I'm throwing a spy bait. A spy bait, I want to have that bait run as level as possible, and I feel like that braided line, making those long casts and then having that braided line floating, ends up pulling that spy bait so that it's got that nose up run to it. And so I don't use any braided line or any kind of a leader in that situation. I just go straight fluorocarbon. So guys, that's kind of the way that I work. I think this is a by feel thing. And I will tell you that I will a lot of times choose the length of my fluorocarbon leader based on water clarity, based on the bait that I'm throwing, based on whether that bait is getting into the water and then allowing to go down to the bottom, and then is it being worked in the, somewhere in the water column, or is it being worked off the bottom? If it's being worked off the bottom where there's more of an angle to the presentation, that just puts that braided, high-vis braided line more in line with where I think the fish would be, which means that I'm going to increase the leader length. But say, for example, again, just as an example, if I'm throwing a wacky rig Cinco where that bait's going to come down and it's going to flutter down, I might pull it up, flutter down, pull it up, flutter down. If I'm in 10 feet of water and I've got 7 feet of leader length, there may be a couple feet that actually goes into the top of the water, but then it's getting pulled up. That high-vis braided line isn't anywhere near that Cinco as it's fallen down, and I don't think that it has any impact at all in terms of, scaring the fish or spooking the fish away. But I'll look at that. Is it a clear water situation versus a stained water situation? Things like that. So water clarity and depth of water and the type of presentation I'm making, all 3 of those things go into my decision about the actual length of the leader. I hope that helps, guys. If you have any questions or comments about that, please send those in the comments. I appreciate you tuning in, and we will talk to you again on the next Mark Fisher Outdoors. Take care, everybody.